Hi guys, and welcome to another dungeon video. The last one was really good. I loved the Shards of Oola. It took quite a while. I haven't quite edited it yet. I don't know whether it's going to be 2 episodes or maybe even 3. I guess it depends how much I ramble in the lore section. But what a fantastic dungeon. So we'll read our dungeon guide to see about that. And the Elementalist thing went really well. So I did ask, maybe we could get a few more. We do only have 2, I think, for this run. But I'm still using my Shockwave build because I just absolutely loved that last time. So Shards of Oola. What a great little dungeon this was. An ancient ghost recounted a haunting tale of piracy and betrayal. Following her defeat during the Second Great Corsair War, the Corsair leader Lady Glaive sailed the tattered remnants of her fleet north to the Tarnished Coast. I've not actually talked about this yet because I haven't done the post-commentary yet, but Lady Glaive, obviously, she was a character that was referenced a few times in Nightfall, and in fact has a skill named after her. It's actually pretty cool. There she parlayed a deal with King Zoran of Or, father to the King Reza, to gain amnesty for her forces within the caverns we now call the Shards of Oola. Unbeknownst to Lady Glaive, one of her own lieutenants, a young corsair named Fendi, made his own deal with the king's advisor. Fendi betrayed his leader and his crew. Glaive escaped, but most of the crew were slain. Their spirits remain enslaved by the betrayals of the past. Soon afterward, the dark pact Fendi made with the advisor showed its true nature. Fendi joined the ranks of the undead, forced for all eternity to draw his power from the souls of those trapped with him. And once again, I've just noticed I don't have my glass of water again with me. Whatever, so yeah, this is actually, you know what, last time, at the start of last dungeon video, I mentioned that actually the Bloodstone Caves has probably got the best lore. I guess that's kind of the most significant lore, but this is probably the best story, actually. I really do enjoy this story of the Shards of Oola, and it sheds quite a lot of decent light, actually, on Or itself, which is such a mysterious, awesome place that I'll just gobble up any information I can possibly get about it. But okay, so there we go. That's the Shards of Oola. Today we're doing another, this is what I would consider to be one of the easier dungeons, although it remains to be seen whether we'll find it that easy. But it's called Oola's Lab, so for that we're going to be going to Ratasum, and it's another one of those ones that takes us straight back in through a mission. So I'm going to make sure everybody's okay and everybody's set. You'll see we've only got 7 people here. We're actually meeting the last guy at Ratasum, and then we'll be walking to Oola's Lab. In fact, I'm just going to cut it. I'm just going to cut out the middleman straight away here. We're going to go to Ratasum, and then we're going to walk straight here to Oola's Lab, which is basically what we saw in the Let's Play. So I'll catch you guys when we're just outside of the entrance. So yeah, let's do this. Yes, first we do read out the dungeon book. No, ignore that. That was stupid because we need to actually get the quest from Ratasum. So, for the quest, we actually get to speak to Blim, which is pretty awesome. I always get a bit confused at Ratasum because there's so many people with different things to talk to you about. Like, one of them's for Golem, one of them's for this, one of them's for this. But I think it's actually Blim we want to speak to. So, obviously, we know how important he is now that we've done the War in Kryta. We know how significant he's going to be for sort of Golem advancement with Asura in the future. But you actually speak to him first, and you can see all these little quotes. He says, "And I don't care if you fire me either because I told her. I told Oola that if she moves my desk one more time, then I'm quitting." He just rambles about crap like this in a typical Blim fashion. In fact, he even talks about Asura cake. I've been to Ratasum so much during the Let's Play. You've probably seen him talking about it. He's like, "Oh, she said I could get some Asura cake, but then I didn't get any Asura cakes." He's just so many references to this guy from Office Space. It's just ridiculous. But we can actually speak to him, you see, and we can tell him that we pity him and do a quest for him. So he says, "Oh, it's you again. Perhaps you can help me." Yes, you can. You see, I went looking for my staff. It's in Oola's workshop, I'm certain. It's a nice red staff, but the golems they've gone crazy. With Oola gone, no one is maintaining the security golems. They must have broken down. I suppose this is supposed to take place after Oola left, sort of to work on the golem project for defeating the destroyers. I guess is kind of how that works, because you can't do the quest before you've done it in the main storyline, I don't think. If you can, that'd be quite weird. But yeah, I think that's kind of how it goes. He says, "I bet the Total Protection Security Regulator Golem has a cracked circuit crystal. Yes, the TPS regulator has definitely cracked. Without a strict TPS regulator, the whole system breaks down. That must be it. Now, I can't search for my staff. If you don't help me, I'll burn the place down." Okay, I pity you. Yes, I will help. So we can grab this, and this is actually how we start the dungeon. It's not one of those like the last one we saw at the Shards of Oola where it's right outside the dungeon. You get it from here, and then we can move on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add our last guy, and then we'll make our walk over, and then we'll cut it to there, and it will be with me doing the post-commentary. So I hope you guys enjoy this dungeon, guys. I hope I enjoyed the dungeon, and yeah, I'll see you in a second. Alright, okay, so this is post-commentary. Hi, guys. As soon as you zone out of Ratasum, you can actually find Blim here, who you can speak to. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. I think he's either this could have something to do with the fact that someone in our team had, like, the primary quest for the North going on, like helping the Asura. but I don't think he usually is supposed to stand out there. I did speak to him for a second, and I was like, hold on, can we just zone into the dungeon from here? That doesn't make any sense. And no, you can't, so don't speak to him, because that's for the actual golem project. I don't even know if our team could necessarily have got in if nobody's got to that point in the quest. But in any case, if you come along, this is actually where you enter the mission, and when you kill this oak heart guy, remember he drops the seed, and you drop it in, it forms the bridge, and you can go over there. I started farsing around here for a while, thinking, oh, it must be the same entrance, which, if you ask me, is quite logical. But no, it turns out if you actually press U, you'll see that the dungeon entrance is in a slightly different location to the mission entrance. Can you see that there? Oola's lab's just to the south a little bit. So we turn on our heels and we walk down there, and there you go, there's the car, and now we're actually at the entrance of the dungeon, so do bear that in mind. And basically you get in through a side entrance of the this is another one. I could have sworn that this dungeon was pretty much, the dungeon version of it was pretty much a complete repeat of exactly what the mission was like, but it's really not. There's loads of different areas you go to. I guess I was a bit too cynical, or didn't really appreciate how different the dungeons really were, because playing through this again, and it wasn't, I suppose it was probably quite a while ago now actually that I played them before doing this series, but playing through them again really has opened my eyes. They are actually a bit better than I give them credit for, I must admit. But anyway, we go inside, there's lots of malfunctioning golems and stuff. Before we get into the lore, I figured I'd do what I did with the last episode actually, and talk a little bit about the dungeon as well. So when you load immediately in, you find this lost note here, which basically says that Blim's been fired. Wiki does say that that's also a reference to Office Space. I swear to God, we keep doing so much stuff with Blim, I should just sit down and watch Office Space. There you go, apparently that's another reference. I thought it was quite funny. There's not that much dialogue or that goes on to do with Blim or the Asura here, but however, there is a human in here trying to actually pillage the place and trying to loot it because of all the malfunctioning golems. And essentially what he does, he's called GN, and he keeps popping up over and over and over in a quest. I actually thought as I was playing through this, you'll see me type in all chat, I thought GN was like his a name of something but backwards. I'm looking on Wiki right now and it's not. I don't know why I had that in my head. But anyway, so what we're actually going to do here is I figure I'll just read out all the dialogue he says as you go through. So as you keep moving through, as you keep progressing, and he keeps getting angrier and angrier and angrier with you and saying different stuff. So the first thing you hear of him, he says, I suppose you're here for the treasure too. Let me be clear. I'm looting the workshop of that floppy-eared nuisance and you're not. If you've got a problem with that, you'll have to argue the point with these improved security golems. So why don't you make it easy on yourself and just go back the way you came? So yeah, the idea is, I guess, that he's like been tinkering with the golems himself, which is quite interesting that a booker, a human, could be doing that, fiddling around with the golems. And I don't know, they definitely don't fight him, so he is doing something right with them, and he's supposedly making them stronger and hate us even more. In any case, it's pretty much the same story as when we were in here the first time, I suppose. It's just slightly different. And he says, now if you'll excuse me, I have a workshop to raid. Then he pops up a little bit later and he says, didn't you hear me the first time? Buzz off, and you kill him. And then he's an assassin, so he shadow steps in and shadow steps out, if you're wondering. Every time you kill him, he disappears again. And then he pops up again and he says, can't you try harder? Make it a bit more challenging as you're kicking as us. You'll see when he says that line and we're in the dungeon, we just completely own him. Eventually he drops a key, which you can pick up, and that takes you down into the second floor of the dungeon. On that topic, actually, there was a B team for this. I feel a bit mean calling you guys a B team. Maybe we should be team 1 and you guys can be team A. But anyway, there was another team going through, you know, with the extra people. Sadly, they hit a bug, as far as I'm aware. They actually hit a bug. Also, someone in my guild was going through in hard mode with all of his heroes, and he beat us all. But the other team had a bug, and this is quite a common bug with this dungeon. Sometimes GN doesn't drop the key, and it will stop the door being able to open, which really sucks. If you remember when I was doing the Let's Play, I talked quite a lot about another bug that was going on in the actual mission version as well, where one of the golems couldn't get to the gate or something like that. It just seems like a generally quite a buggy dungeon. I suppose that's because it's one of the more interesting ones that lays all the traps down and stuff, but yeah, so do watch out for that. It's never personally happened to me, but it can happen. There is another bug as well. I think that door thing can also happen in this dungeon version as well, which sucks, but do bear that in mind. Jian repeats himself a little bit here. He says, didn't you hear me the first time? Buzz off, which is quite ironic because he says that line 3 times. But okay, he also says, I shouldn't have eaten beans with breakfast this morning. He says, you've got to be kidding me. Eventually, when you beat him, he doesn't say anything. It just says ... And the funny thing about that bit of dialogue, actually, is ... is like placeholder dialogue. When dialogue in Guild Wars bugs out, and a hero or something's supposed to say something but it bugs out, it will just come up with ... And in fact, there was something that was in an event that was in War in Kryta, which I'm going to talk about, probably at the end of War in Kryta now, that did actually have the ... there once as well, which is quite interesting. So I don't don't know whether that's actually bugged out dialogue. I wouldn't be too surprised considering they've written the same bit of dialogue 3 times here. That does look a little bit lazy, so, you know, it's not too far-fetched to think that maybe that slipped past them. He also says, you just don't know when to quit, do you? And finally, he says, beaten by amateurs, how embarrassing. Then you get the reward dialogue, which, of course, we will read at the end of the dungeon. So that's basically it for the dungeon. One thing I did want to do when we were going through the dungeon was I wanted, as you can see here, there's like flame guardians and different stuff. If you kill the flame guardian, well, you might not see the flame guardian on screen right now if I speed it up, but basically these flame guardians you might see me fighting, you kill those to disable traps, and they've got a role to play with the boss at the end. It's not something we've not seen before. There was certainly, I think it was in Cathandrax, there was some stuff like that. There's been stuff like that dotted all around, but also some of the puzzles that were in the actual mission, you kind of get to do again, but there's a different take on it. In fact, you'll see, you know, the invincible golem, you know, there's like in the actual section of the workshop where there's all of the bits of the iron forgemen in there, sort of the replicas of it scattered around the workshop in that big room. There's like a huge, in the mission, there's a huge like redundant area off on the right hand side, which I did show you. It's the bit with like the Messar architecture fire thing that I'm pretty sure isn't supposed to really be Messar architecture, it's just reusing assets. But that bit there, actually in the dungeon, that they actually make use of that, and that's where you fight the invincible golem. So it's very slightly different, but it is generally stuff we've all seen before, really. But yeah, that's the dungeon. I quite liked it. It's a cool dungeon. I did want to go and see the door that we saw when we went into Zin's secret lair place, which would have been quite cool, but I don't think I ended up filming there in the end, which is a bit of a shame, but whatever. Once again, we did lots of elementalists as we came. Cool, I've got so much to say about this dungeon, I didn't think I really did. In the end, we did bring lots of elementalists again. A lot of you have been leaving comments, actually, saying, oh, I feel a bit put off because I don't have an elementalist. Look, don't worry about it, it's not a massive deal, it was just something fun we could do. Please, feel free to come, don't let the whole elementalist thing bog you down, it's just a nice plus if you've got it. I mean, really, don't worry about it. And that's about it. I suppose, you know, my build's changed a little bit. It's because in the last, in the Shards of Ore, all I did, right, was I just slapped on Shockwave instead of my Elite, you might have seen, and then I just raised Earth Magic up really high. But I actually still had, like, Wind Prayer skills on my bar and stuff, which is terrible. So I very quickly, before doing this dungeon, I was like, right, maybe I should sort this out. Got rid of the Wind Prayer thing, so I was like, right, so now I've got 2 slots, or I had 3 slots, because I put Balthazar's Rage in there as well. And I was like, well, what the hell can I use for this? And I thought, well, Light of Deldrimor usually holds us up, because usually only one person brings it. Everybody wants the treasure, but it's got such a long cooldown. So I was like, you know what, I'll just bring Light of Deldrimor, help whoever it is that's going to be popping the chests. And I brought Sunspit. Also, you know, it's the dungeon series. I should probably actually use one of the key skills to do with the dungeons in the actual series. If you guys don't know how it works, I don't think I've specifically mentioned it. I think I vaguely mentioned it when we got the skill. How Light of Deldrimor works is you use it, and it actually has a use in battle, funnily enough, and it might seem like a bit of a crappy use. It doesn't do much AoE, but it does do AoE, point blank AoE damage around you. It's not much, but you'd be surprised. It was used in a lot of like Domain of Anguish builds. In fact, you can probably see us using it back when I did my coverage of the Domain of Anguish. But aside from that, also, when you use the skill, it's got an out-of-combat mechanic. When you use it, you'll see pings, if there's any treasure around, you'll see pings appear on the radar, kind of like a metal detector or something. And then on that corresponding place on the map where it pinged, you can see on the floor like a little blue light will glow. If you then use the skill again after it's recharged on the blue glow, you've got a random chance for something to pop up. It will either be a chest, or it will be a dwarven ghost, or what else can come out of those? Sometimes it's like a secret area, but that's basically how it works. And then you can open these little chests for tiny little rewards, and the rewards in the chests get gradually better as you go more floors down in a dungeon, which is why it's always rewarding to go into 5-floor dungeons, because then you get floor 4 and floor 5 where there's really nice rewards there typically. So yeah, that's how that works. I think I've rambled enough about the dungeon. Let's get on with the lore. Last, in the Shards of Ore, I said, and I was so stupid about this. I was like, oh, we've done Char Week now, but how are we might not have time for Asura Week. I'm an idiot. I completely forgot about this dungeon here. So look, we can easily fit in Asura Week as far as I'm aware. There was only one lore article sort of between Char Week and Asura Week, if I remember rightly. And that was, or at least I can see right now, and that was in May. So Char Week was in April, if I remember this correctly, and now we're in May of 2011. And the first article that came out in May was something called Shadows in the Water, the Crate. Now, this is an article I've talked about a lot in the Eye of the North Let's Play, and I remember when I read this, and I haven't read it since. I maybe read it a couple of times around the week where it first came out, but since then I haven't read it. And I remember when I read it, I really liked how dark, how evil, how grim the Crate came across in this. And so I'm looking forward to this. It was something I referenced a lot in Eye of the North, because the Crate seemed a little bit underwhelming. They didn't seem to have much backstory in game itself, but with the help of this blog, it really helps position them in the world. It's really, really quite cool. Other stuff did happen in May, but not much of it is really lore stuff as far as I can see. You've got, this was when they revealed Lion's Arch at last. Like, we'd seen it in demos, we'd seen the outside of it and a big portal with a red cross going through it saying, no, you may not enter Lion's Arch. And we were all super excited about it because it looked amazing. And then in May, they released this video of Lion's Arch. And if you haven't seen it, YouTube that shit right now. It's amazing. It looks so good. And then in the Gamescom a few months later, in the demo trailer, the new demo trailer, they did Lion's Arch again, and then they panned into the sky and there were all these zeppelins and stuff. So it looks, if you do YouTube it, it looks even better now than it did in that video that you'll see. It's so good. And then they released a blog post along with it by someone called Matthew Medina, and he talked about sort of how they designed the city and how they designed stuff like this. I swear the two cities in Kryta are the best cities by far than anywhere else in the game, as far as I'm really concerned, or I can see. They just seem so cool. I was hoping Ratasum would measure up way better as well, because in the first trailer, Ratasum, like you'll notice on this WTF series thing I'm doing, which I still think I should really rename, but you'll see, like, when I'm doing that, most of I'm pretty sure every single one has had a section of Ratasum in there somewhere, like the golems walking in the line, or, you know, going up the massive pyramid. But then when Asura Week came out, and I should probably talk about this when we're talking about Asura Week, but when it came out and they did the video, I don't know, it seemed to just look a lot more barren and just worse. It really, really did. But in any case, so Shadows in the Water. Sorry, back to the Crate. I think this is a brilliant article. Once again, it's by Rhys Salisbury. I've noticed that Jeff Grubb doesn't seem to write many of these articles. I wonder why. He does mostly it's those two are the big world builders. Obviously, they're not the only writers in the game. There's loads more, but they're like the big world builders. But Rhys always seems to be the one that comes up with the articles. Jeff does mostly the dungeons. They say that they're split. Like, she does dynamic events and personal storyline stuff, I think, and Jeff does dungeons, just dungeons. That sounds really weird to me, because it sounds like, from what we know so far, like Rhys would be doing so much more of the work, like a ridiculous amount of work, while Jeff has just got the dungeons. Or you can look at it the other way and you can be like, if that's about a 50-50 split, then shit, that's a lot of stuff going on with the dungeons. When they talked about branching storylines in the explorable versions of the dungeons, that could be quite a lot if the amount of work he's doing is measuring up to everything Rhys doing, which is all the dynamic events and personal stories and stuff. But yeah, so in any case, well, mind you, she writes the overall story for those, I think, but she doesn't actually write the text or anything. That's what the actual other writers do. In any case, sorry, to the Crate. Right, so this is called Shadows in the Water. We get a nice little bit of concept art here of some people swimming around. I think those are people, at least. They look a little bit like Sylvari. I don't know. And can you see, like, on their top right, you can see kind of like snaky looking things in the water. I'm not sure if that's kind of hinting that those are the Crate or not. Hold on, let me grab a glass of water before we tuck into this. Okay, so here we go. For centuries, tales have been told of pillared cities rising above the water, far out at sea. Spires reach up from the waves with no land visible on any horizon, and their bases coil down into the ocean's depths where no air breather could survive. Lost sailors live there, their ships crushed by storms. Glittering parapets soar, formed from wood and glass, and pirate treasure long thought to be lost at sea. One thing, like, I like to bear in mind when I'm reading this blog post is, if you think about, like, the real world history, like years and years and years ago, how mysterious and deep and scary the sea was, and all that kind of fear that came out of people, and you know, you look at the sea and how many, like, sea monsters and stuff people imagined and invented in the past, and it's because it really is this deep mysterious, and it still is. Like, people say we know more about the moon than we do about the depths of our own ocean, but you, like, put that into the context of, like, a world like Guild Wars 2's, or what ours was like, you know, maybe 500, 600 years ago, and just, I like to kind of keep that hanging around there, because it kind of puts it into context and makes this all seem so much more scary to me. So yeah, what are these spires? The truth is that such places do exist. Yet, while legends make them sound beautiful and exotic, reality is a far darker tale. These pillared cities are slave pens, built to hold land dwellers alive above the waves until they're required for sacrifice. Those who live upon them are desperate, maddened creatures that gaze down every day into the dark waters and know that their time will soon come. Living on scraps of fish thrown to them by their captors, they eke out a pathetic existence while always watching for a sail on the horizon, praying, begging and screaming for someone to rescue them before the Crate return. Okay, so we get a quote here from a Norn skald called Jarl Foxcoat, who says, "Dark shapes slither through the water, shadows within shadows of waves. Watch your children if they walk too close to the shore. Watch yourself. Far too many have vanished into these waters, and none have ever returned from the deeps." Okay. Also, something else to remember, obviously, we can swim in Guild Wars 2. Yay, there's probably going to be like a whole explorable area place that's entirely water. At least I hope there is. If there's not, I'll be very, very upset. But yeah, that should be really cool. So this is all stuff we're going to be able to explore and interact with in some way. The Krayt are intelligent, serpent-like creatures with long tails, suited for speed in the water, but torsos and arms that are more humanoid, albeit with scales, horns, and lizard-like heads. It's describing that there, and on the right I can see a nice image of a Krayt. So they look quite different to their Guild Wars 1 counterparts. You can kind of see the same-ish thing. It's not as radical as what happened to the Oak Hearts, but I'll throw that up on screen so you can kind of picture it easier as we read out the description here. They are incredibly vicious creatures, completely uninterested in the needs or well-being of others. Coming close to death transforms them, causing them to shapeshift out of religious frenzy. In such a state they are even more difficult to destroy. So the shape-shifting was something we saw in Guild Wars 1. I don't know how clear I made it, but when you're fighting the Krayt, they can use something called metamorphosis, and when they use it, they'll turn into some other form that it can either heal, or it'll be a different type of Ellie or something like that. And they did actually physically, their character models did change. I've talked about it a few times, but there's a skill in the game, Mesmer Elite skill, that you can use to interrupt an ability an enemy's using and steal their skill. And for a while, you could use that. Actually, it was bugged, and you could use that on the Krayt on metamorphosis. And when you used it, it would transform your whole character, your character's skill bar, everything. It was just absolutely amazing. It was there in Guild Wars 1, and they expanded on it in Guild Wars 2, and we now know that for some reason it's something to do with a religion of theirs. Equally comfortable above and below water, the Krayt have never felt truly threatened by any of the land-dwelling races of Tyria. Perhaps that is why they've not bothered to communicate with other races. They have no need of anything land-dwellers can give them other than slaves for their use and sacrifices for their rituals. However, the Krayt can seize those for themselves with ruthless efficiency. Oh, that's such a mouthful. With ruthless efficiency. Even the amphibious Hylek are at a disadvantage when fighting underwater. No Hylek tribe has been able to mount an effective force against the Krayt. So yeah, remember that this is so... this is what I love it. I love it when they mention all the other races that we've been introduced to too. The Quaggan are terrified of them. We haven't talked about the Quaggan in the blog post. Have they not had their own blog post? I thought they did have one at one point. Maybe it was later in the year. Or have we just heard a hell of a lot of them from outside the block? Anyway, okay. The Quaggan are terrified of them and tell tales of their monstrous chantries beneath the sea. The Krayt have never been beaten and do not believe themselves to be defeatable.